Okay, hello. We're going to talk today a little bit about what trade secrets are and what sort of information they protect and how you protect them, just the basics. And it starts with thinking about how trade secrets are so common in business. And the reason for that is that it's about any information at all that gives you some sort of advantage in your business. And a good rule of thumb is just anything you don't want the competition to know. And it's because it's so broad that we pay a lot of attention to it, and that um, you're able to use trade secrets in your business without having to go through a lot of issues around filings, registration, and so forth. In fact, of all the forms of intellectual property, trade secrets are the only ones that don't require any registration at all. And you may have run into patents a lot, and they apply to inventions. But what makes trade secrets different is that they apply to information. And as you know, we're in the information age right now. And what that means is that all businesses of any size rely more on data these days than any other kind of asset. In fact, just in the last generation, the kind of assets that businesses develop and protect has shifted from solid, tangible assets to information, intangible assets, to the point where the value of most publicly held companies these days is mainly in their intangible assets, and that means data. We know, for example, Amazon sells lots of things. They're a store, but one of the most valuable aspects of what they do is the information that they gather about what kinds of things we need, because they can use that information to suggest things that we may want to buy, and that really helps them drive their business. In the same way, Google has a secret algorithm that runs its search engine, and the value of that to the company is enormous, and they certainly wouldn't want their competitors to get it. But even looking at smaller businesses, like a restaurant that has recipes that you keep in the back, and we don't let people see them. That's something that provides value to that business, because others don't know it. Boy, that's really delicious. How are you doing that? And say, well, that's grandma's recipe, and we're not going to tell you about it. So we need to think very, very broadly about trade secrets if we're going to think about the opportunity that they give us to enhance the value of our business. And the reason we need to think about them is that they don't just exist out there. The information that provides value will only last as a secret if you pay attention to it. Because unlike patents, where if you file and get a patent from the government, it lasts for a fair period of time, 20 years, and you have a government guarantee behind it that you'll be able to exclude others from doing that invention. Trade secrets are very different. They are a little more vulnerable to being lost. And so you need to pay very close attention to how are you managing the secrecy of this information. And to begin with, what is it that you have? One of the things I've found in working with hundreds and hundreds of companies over many, many years about this is a lot of businesses don't pay close enough attention to understanding what exactly it is that gives them this advantage over their over their competitors, so that they can take special care of it, and so that they can develop more of it, so they have more of an advantage. So let me give you an example. A company that makes wrenches and sells them to customers who then resell them to stores. And so they have larger companies that they deal with as their customers. They know about what each of those customers that buy, each of them buys a lot of wrenches from them. They know the kinds of things that are important to them, how they want things packaged, when do they want their deliveries, when do they pay, are the ones that pay more reliably than others, and you collect all of this information. It gives you the ability to run your business in a more efficient way and to plan better than perhaps one of your competitors. But to really be able to manage these assets and get the most out of them, one of the things that you need to do is to sit down and work with the senior managers, whoever it is in the business, that understands what is it that makes us better than the competition. Let's talk about that. Let's see what it is. And is there anything that keeps you up at night that the competition might discover by themselves about what we're doing, or that we might lose it somehow? Let's say if an employee were to leave and go to work for a competitor. And so the first thing we do is identify the information that is sort of our crown jewels. What is our secret recipe? What are the things that are most important, that are special about our business, that allows us to perhaps charge a little bit more, make a little more profit than our competition? Having looked at what that is, then we think about, well, what are the risks that information has around it? All information sort of lives in an environment of risk, in the sense that it might be lost, or you might bring other information in from somewhere else that contaminates it in a way that gets in the way of your ability to work with it, because you've brought in somebody else's secret information. So what are the things that could go wrong with this information and reduce our ability to control it? And when we've done that, we think about, well, how do we reduce those risks? Now, not all risks can be eliminated. And most people say that secrets in business they have a shelf life, that you can't guarantee that a secret will last forever. Now, some have lasted a long time. There's a family in Armenia that makes what are generally considered to be the best orchestral cymbals in the world. And they have managed to keep the secret of their alloys that they use for making that brass, a secret within their family for over 400 years. So it's possible, but it's not likely that secrets will last forever. Sometimes you lose them because employees leave and they leak. Sometimes documents get lost. Sometimes your competitors will discover the same kind of information themselves, and that might reduce your ability to effectively compete with them. So you need to think about all these areas in which your ability to control that information and get value from it might be affected. And then what can you do about that? Is there anything that would allow you to feel more comfortable that you have better control? So, for example, one of the things that companies do is they make sure that all of their employees sign non-disclosure agreements. And if they're talking with outside vendors or even customers sometimes, in a way that would have to reveal information that they consider to be very sensitive, they'll have them sign non-disclosure agreements too. They'll also engage with their employees to make sure that they understand through training what it is that they can do to make sure that information stays inside the company and that we don't share any more than we have to outside. And if we do have to share it outside, we do it in a way that keeps it under control for us. And we make sure that those who have access to this information are very carefully communicated. Sorry, so I'm going to pause here. One of the aspects that's a very effective way to reduce risk in almost all these categories is around training of employees, very specific training. Why is that? It's because studies have shown the greatest loss that happens over the control of valuable information happens because of employee inadvertence, sloppiness, not usually because employees are malicious, but because they misunderstand what their obligations are to help keep the information inside the company. And so one of the best, most effective and least expensive ways to protect your information while still sharing it with your employees is to make sure that you've trained your employees thoroughly so that they know what is it that we consider to be most valuable and what should you be doing and not doing to make sure that this information stays inside. And that extends through the whole life cycle of the relationship with your employees. So that, for example, when they're leaving, the business should always make sure that they understand what their obligations are continuing after they leave to protect as a secret the most important information that you have shared with them to be able to run your business. They understand the difference between the general skill and knowledge that they're entitled to use when they leave and go to work for another company and your real trade secrets. Now, nobody who has access to Google's algorithm at the company can leave and use that information at another company. And you need to make sure that your employees are clear about that and that they understand that you care. Just paying attention to this issue, communicating with the people who are the source of greatest risk to the integrity of the information, that will pay huge dividends because they will much more likely act in a way that does protect the information. Same is true with your outside vendors and others that you sort of partner with. Dealing with others outside the company is especially fraught because unlike your employees, they don't have a loyalty directly to your organization. So you have to have a strong understanding, an agreement, a contract that ensures that they're going to respect the information that you share with them and not use it for some other purpose or disclose it to others. So the biggest mistakes that I've seen in handling these outside relationships is not companies that fail to use a non-disclosure agreement. Many of them do, most of them do. But the agreements that they use are treated a bit like a form, and they don't pay attention to what's in them. Number one, because there are terms in those agreements that can be very problematic. For example, the time limit on treating something as confidential. You may not want there to be a 3-year limit or a 2-year limit. You may want this to be indefinite. On the other hand, if you're receiving information, you may not want to have the responsibility to protect it indefinitely. So these things need to be negotiated, and you need to make an informed decision about what it is that's in the agreement. And then when you have a good agreement executed, you need to make sure that somebody is managing it. And there are risks in managing these relationships on both sides. I mean, the company that's receiving confidential information wants to make sure that it knows exactly what the other company expects it to do and what the information is. And so you have to be very careful, for example, if there's disclosure, verbal disclosures, that somebody keeps track of those things, and that at the end of the agreement, both sides, whatever it is that they're working on, if it's a potential merger, or if it's a product design, or an agreement to develop a certain market together, whatever it is, when you get to the end of it, then we need to do what we all were taught to do in kindergarten, which is clean up after ourselves. And what that means in this context is somebody needs to take responsibility for ensuring that whatever information was shared gets returned and accounted for. Because if you leave these things undone or ambiguous, and I can tell you my experience, that is the most common source of disputes and litigation. And of course, you do not want to get yourselves involved in litigation. So what is it? What are the things that you need to think about to actually have a trade secret? What is it that makes it a secret, where the law will back you up? The first thing is that the information has to be a secret. It can't be something that you can find on the internet. It can't be sort of the general knowledge that everybody who works in this industry has. And it can't be the skill set of employees, that's software engineers who know how to write efficient code. That's not something you can claim as a trade secret. But if you have secrets, if you have figured out a new way to build a widget, some device, you've discovered some process that's more efficient than what you're using before, what your competitors are using. If you have come up with a design for a product that will be very effective and produce something that will allow you to make a better profit and so forth, you want to protect that design at least until the product is marketed. There are many examples that you can think of, and stop and think about them. What is it in your business that you want to keep a secret? So if it is a secret, if it's something that isn't generally known, that's the first requirement. The second one is that it does need to be something of value. It needs to give you an advantage. Now, it doesn't have to be exclusive, right? Because it's possible that one or more of your competitors may have discovered the same thing. But if you're in an industry that has many participants, that may not matter to you. And so you'll take the advantage that you can get. And in this sense, there will be some value to the information, either because it's something that you can use right now, or because it's part of your research and development that you're engaged in to come up with a better product. The third thing that you need to establish to have a trade secret is you have to do the kinds of things I was talking about earlier that show people that you care. We call this reasonable efforts to maintain secrecy. So reasonable efforts is is something that you have to look at in context. It's not like you have a little checklist Well, checklists can be helpful, but just to say, well, we all use passwords, we have a strong firewall, we make our guests sign in, and so on and so forth. That may be useful to give the impression that you have a secure environment. But with respect to any particular information that you're trying to maintain as a trade secret, it's important that you look at, well, what are we doing to protect that particular information? Are we locking it down enough so that we'll be able to explain to a judge or jury, if we have to, that we really acted as to that information in a way that shows that we wanted to keep it a secret, that we saw it as something valuable. So what you need to do will vary from one situation to the next, but if you follow the process that I talked about earlier, which is fundamental risk management, of identifying the information that you care about, identifying the risks that it faces, how vulnerable is it in the day-to-day operation of your business and with the various relationships that you have, and then look at what are the ways that you can reduce those risks that are acceptable to you. Then you will have gone through the process of reasonable efforts, and you will be able to demonstrate that you have a trade secret. Now, this isn't as daunting as it might sound like. When you get into a rhythm of understanding your information, and you have shared your objectives and concerns with the workforce, you have managers who are aware of secrecy and what needs to be done, it becomes an integrated, organic part of the way that the business operates day to day. You don't have to come in every day and say, all right, what are we going to do today to protect our trade secrets? Much of what you will have to do in order to get a program in place is simply common sense. And as I said at the beginning of all of this, paying attention to the things that matter that you don't want the competition to know. So, keep in mind that trade secrets can be something very obvious, like formulas, the formula for WD-40, the penetrating oil, right? It's called WD-40 because it was the 40th formula in a long line of attempts to come up with something that worked, and this was the one that did. It may be a formula like that, or a recipe like the secret blend of 11 herbs and spices that you've heard so much about. But it can also be information about your customers, what they like. It can be information about your future plans as a business, your finances as a business. You don't want the competition to know that. You don't want the competition to have your customer lists. You don't want them to have information about your employees at the level where they might be able to get information that would help them recruit them away. So you can protect all of that business information, and you can protect technology, formulas, designs, software, almost anything in the business. So let me just close by giving you an example of a trade secret that I know you've heard about, because everyone refers to it as the most famous trade secret of all. And of course, that's the formula for Coca-Cola. And one of the things that I tell my students at the beginning of my class every year is that it's possible. This is kind of a thought experiment. It's possible that the Coca-Cola company has a trade secret that's even more valuable than the formula for making Coke that was created back in the 1880s. As we all know, it's held in a safe in Atlanta. I've been there. It's very big. But what is it that might be even more valuable as a trade secret to that company? And nobody ever really guesses this. And it's a hypothetical. I don't know that this is true, but if it could be proven that Coca-Cola is not using the original formula, if it somehow came out and could be proved by one of their competitors, that would be a dark day for the Coca-Cola company, because it has built so much of its brand mystique around the formula, the original formula for Coca-Cola. We learned this, of course, back in the 1980s when Coca-Cola tried to change the formula and brag about it, and the product tanked. So we need to recognize that trade secrets are an asset that, unlike almost any other kind of business asset, it's within our power to build it and to protect it. But it does require our attention to do that.